Good evening and welcome to the 6th round of the Sim Racing Online 1950s Grand Prix series. We are at Zandvoort today for what should be the championship finale. It's been a very interesting season with 5 rounds. Our drivers have been battling it out all season long. We've been racing every couple of weeks. And we are here at the 6th round on the beaches of the Netherlands, so just off the coast in a place called Zandvoort. We are using the 60s version of Zandvoort, so nice bank turns. I would say mostly flat out, but it will vary depending on what car you're in. But we are in the 1950s cars, which are very, very slippy and tough to handle at times. But the story so far is we've had 5 rounds, all with different outcomes. But where we've been so far, so we started off with the first round at Pescara in Spain, 25 kilometers of public roads, and then we headed to Germany for the Sachsenring 1960s, and then went to Northern Ireland for Dundrod 1950s, and then the coast of Napoli in Italy, which had varied results. We had a little bit of wet weather for that round, and then the last round 2 weeks ago was at Rouen in France, and we are here for the final round. So where do we sit with the championship standings so far? So be aware that our point system is the old version of the point system. It is 8 for a win, then 6, 4, 3 and 2, so only the top 5 places will get points in these races. So Maddie Shepherd, if I've done my maths correctly, is actually leading by 12 points, so she cannot be caught no matter what happens tonight. So Maddie Shepherd has won the championship in the 5th round. Gert Van Osch not far behind on 18 points, and Julian Paws not far behind still on 15 points, but from 3rd backwards, we've got Julian Paws, Costas Kanzaris and Tony Talviti, 15 and 14 respectively. So that last step of the podium, in fact maybe 2nd, 3rd and 4th could change hands. 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th could change hands. Gaten Noyes back in 6th, has 6 points, so a bit of work to do to move up the positions. Now if I've done my maths correctly, 6 points means that they're 8 points behind, so Gaten Noyes would have to do something really special, but that would mean that top 5 would have to not score, which today we've got a good 12 cars on the server at the moment, so as long as people start the race they should score points for the top 5, so being there or thereabouts is always good. So in terms of what we are running, let's have a look at our cars that we're running this season. So first of all, the Aston Martin DBR4. It's a car that, again, I mention this every time, but it's a car that didn't get picked in the season opener, and it hasn't inspired anyone to pick it throughout the season either. So I don't know what it is about that car. Neither did the Connaught. So the Connaught Type B was not a popular car. We only saw it once this season, this 6-race season, but we've yet to see it after, I think it was the 3rd round that someone tried the Connaught Type B. So the most popular car on the track by far is the Cooper T43, whether it be its balance, whether it be its speed or nimbleness. We have seen a few drivers getting a little bit out of shape at the end of the races. The setup characteristics do change an awful lot, but the ever-present Ferrari 246, which you will hear around the track. If you can't see it, you can hear it. It's a lovely engine note. So we've got a couple of those in the field. And then for the unique looking Lancia D50. So the Lancia D50 is, I believe they are fuel tanks on the side of that car. And it's kind of a mix between an open wheeler and a sports car, but it's defined as an open wheeler at this point. And then we have only one driver that took the Lotus Type 16. As you can see, that driving position all the way back at the rear of the chassis. We then have our last car on the grid. It's the Maserati 250F. Again, it's got a good engine note, but not many people have taken the Maserati. I think only one of our drivers is on the track in the Maserati 250F. So interesting choices. So back to tonight's racing. We are going to be doing 60 minutes around this track. Now apparently there is going to be some wet weather near the end of the race. So we've got 60 minutes, and in the last 20 minutes or so there will be some spots of rain, which should spice things up a little. Looking forward to how the drivers will be handling that particular instance of weather. So it's not guaranteed how hard the rain will be. It will just come around at about the 20 minutes mark. So we'll have to look forward to that. So I'm going to be keeping a look on the skies and seeing when the rain finally arrives. But how about we actually head to the track and see how our drivers are faring. They are out in practice at the moment. So, looking at our drivers out on track right now, just be aware that we have been using the automatic camera system throughout this season, and all of the broadcasts that we do in our Factor 2 have been using the automatic camera system, which means that the game will decide what battles we get to look at on track. It saves my brain for other things. I'm juggling a lot of plates here at the track. So as you can see, a lot of green areas. There's a lot of runoff. And the 60s version of this track that was ran between 1948 and 1971. 4.193 kilometers and 2.6 miles, 19 turns at this track, with a race lap record held by Jackie Ickx in the 312B Ferrari in 1970 of 119.23. So currently we have lap times of 129.65. Maddie Shepherd, championship winner, who just has to keep it on the road today. Doesn't need to do anything particularly special, but I imagine she will be going for the win. Dramatic, what would have been like the championship finale that happened at Rouen in France. Maddie Shepherd was knocked down the field due to accidents and had to fight her way all the way back up. And there was a ding-dong battle for the lead for a time. The places further back, there was battles all the way down the field. It didn't matter where you were. There was battles all the way down the field. That track particularly giving us some good action, and this should be no different. So I'm going to have to remind myself of some of these corner names. I have my track map up, and I can see a few a few corner names that are, I think, are actually in Dutch. So bear with me with that. But a lot of bank turns and a lot of commitment corners, I would say, at Zandvoort. That's the name of the game. But we'll have to see what the drivers can do for this last round. I have been mentioning to them that perhaps we want to go out with a bang, a metaphorical bang, not a physical bang. But so after this practice session has wound down, we're going to be heading to qualification. So they will have a 10-minute to 15-minute qualification session. Now unique thing about this series is that when they do head for qualification, they will be out on track together. So finding a little bit of space in that 10 minutes is going to be vital, particularly in these cars as well. You maybe don't want to be stuck behind somebody following through these bank turns. As you see Tony Talviti sweeping through some of these turns. You don't want to cut too many of these turns either, because there are some vicious curbs. And as evidence, you don't want to run wide onto the grass because it's not entirely grippy, and you head to the scene of the accident very, very quickly. So we're just coming to near the third sector of this lap. Laying some rubber down in these two fast right-handers. And then we head into another fast right-hander. Looking up my corner names, so that's Boss In and Boss Ult. So coming around the Boss Ult corner and then back onto the straight, which is probably where most of the passing is going to happen. So down the big long straight. We did see a lot of drafting battles at Rouen, and this should be no different. And our characteristic of this circuit is that most of the corners are banked. And if you're feeling a little bit fruity, you can possibly send one around the outside and possibly be on the inside for the next one. So we'll have to see if that is going to be a thing that people try. It is a little bit risky as we head down to the hairpin tightest corner of the track. Head over the crest and down the hill. As I say, avoiding those curbs on the inside. There is a vicious curb around that hillside on the right. You do not want to hit that. I've hit that one before and it sends you skywards. So trying to stay on the apex around that turn we're going through at the moment. You see, it's very undulating, but a lot of commitment corners. Some of the apexes are very blind. But the latter half of this circuit, and particularly in Sector 3, is probably one of the fastest we've had on the calendar. So Tony Talviti looks quick in that Cooper, but currently down on practice times with 0.9 away from Maddie Shepherd's time. So 1.5 minutes left on the timer for practice. So let's have a look through some of our drivers. So Gaten Noyes, as I said, currently 6th place in the championship. He's one of our Ferrari drivers. Listen to that engine note. A very distinctive Ferrari and a very lovely note. Pushing very hard through these back corners. He's supposed to be going right when he went left there, unfortunately, but I'm sure he will get that sorted. So our only Lotus runner, Gert van Osch, I was hoping that we would go on board. Our only Lotus 16 runner decided to take that car. So Gert van Osch, who was apparently not going to be turning up today, but managed to get home in time. Let's have a look at some of the other cars on the track. So lots of Cooper Climaxes, but one of the other cars on the track is the immense Lancia D50. We do have normally a couple of drivers that take the Lancia D50. Phil Brown is one of them. And then we have Jim Cavallo in the pits at the moment with the Maserati 250F. Beautiful car. Nice big long nose. Looks very similar to the Ferrari 246. So I do get mixed up at times, but the Ferrari is generally either yellow or red. The Maserati is generally bright blue. So we finished the practice session and we're going to be heading over to qualification, which I believe is about 10 minutes or so. It's a very tight pit lane exit, so drivers are going to have to be very wary how they come out the pits and how much space they're going to leave each other. They need a lot of space, because being under the boot lid of a slower driver around this track means you can't extend, you can't push as much as you want to. So who's going to be coming out first? It looks like Gaten Noyes has decided to come out of the pits first. And then we have Another Ferrari following. So that's another yellow Ferrari. I believe that is Marius Labioda coming out of the pits. Lots of Coopers here today. As I say, it was a popular choice. Popular choice of car. But it would be good to have maybe a spec series of these cars. And maybe concentrating on just one of them. So that is the Cooper of Tony Talviti coming out the pits. Unfortunately, he's had a few problems this season. He did have some technical problems with the fourth round at Napoli, as did most of, well, in fact, the top three, Matthew Shepard, Tony Talviti and Julian Bors, all had technical problems because there was a problem with the track that we were using. When we were gridding up, things went a little bit wrong. So Tony was not able to get points from that round. And the admin at Worth was thinking about perhaps adding a 7th round to this championship, but the consensus was there wasn't enough votes to actually add a 7th round. So we stuck with the 6. So Gaten Noyes is coming around the final corner and will be starting his fast lap. So no one in front, and that's a Ferrari, a very yellow Ferrari a bit further back. So nicely spaced out. There's a couple of drivers which are quite close together. So we'll see whether that's an advantage or a disadvantage. You want to be around somebody that's around your the same pace as you. So slightly unruly, maybe cold tyres coming into turn 1. Coming through this left-right flick and up to the hairpin. So Tarzan Bocht is the hairpin, I believe. Tarzan corner is now a bank turn in the modern Zandvoort. We head through these sweeping turns. So as I say, the latter half of this circuit is mostly full commitment, pushing into these bank turns. So Tony Talviti again running a little bit wide. He's following a couple of Coopers ahead, so he'll be able to pace himself with those. But a right old queue of Coopers. As Gaten Noyes just coming through the final section, so a very quick right, and this corner drops away from you. You have to get tight into the apex and make sure that you don't run wide, because it heads on to one of the only passing places on the track, and 3 Coopers all together, so a nice bit of draft for Tony coming up the straight. So Noyes gets a 129.9, so that's comparable to practice. Masaryk comes in second, Van Osch in third, and Talviti indeed gets a nice draft all the way up that straight and goes provisional pole with a 128.4 or 129.4, sorry. So 5 tenths ahead of anybody else in the field, so they're coming in quick and fast. Looks like Tony Talviti is possibly slowing down to get a little bit of space. So Noyes pushing on in second. He's got half a second to find. So it says it's a personal best for him in the first sector. Coming through the really fast last sector here. Stay away from those curbs, because they are really angular. You don't want to hit those. It's not like modern Formula 1 where you can run over the curves. These are vicious. This circuit does have quite a good flow as well. Once you get the corners, once you get the hang of embedding your car into the apex of the corners and maybe half drifting your car around, that's what it's all about with these cars specifically. So Gaten Noyes still 0.5 of a second, has reduced the deficit to 0.4 of a second, so getting closer. Julian Bors in third, 1.3 seconds adrift, and he now drops down to 4th because Van Osch has come across the line with 0.5 away from the pole. So I'm looking out on my track map for our championship winner, Maddie Shepherd, who's currently sitting at the rear of the field, not put a representative time on the board. Maybe deciding to be a little bit conservative this round. And Labioda in the Ferrari pops up to 6th place as we're watching Tony Taubiti come into the pits. I wonder if he's actually had a little bit of an accident. We do actually mandate in sim racing online that you have to do an out lap, a fast lap and an in lap. It makes it feel a bit more authentic. So maybe a little bit of damage, had a little bit of a spin maybe. But Gaten Noig's pushing on. Slightly down in the first sector, but a purple sector in the second sector. So maybe fastest of all, so we have to see whether we can close that definite deficit of 0.4 of a second. How close can he get? Maybe that draft that Tony Taubiti got in the first lap that he did is going to prove difficult for anyone to overhaul. Van Osch currently in 3rd. It's on a slightly slower lap. Pushing that Lotus up over into turn 1. Julian Paws in the white Cooper up the main straight. No draft for Julian. Looks like there's a Maserati not far behind. I think there's Jim Cavallo. So Marius Labioda, another Ferrari driver, currently 8th place. Drop down to 9th. Is that going to push him up with that lap time? It is. He's up to 7th place. Gaten Noig is going a little bit wide, pushing a bit too hard. But no damage done. Now, as you see later on in the lap, if you get any of these corners wrong, you are heading over these hills and possibly flipping your car into the trees, ripping off a couple of wheels perhaps. So we're going to be very, very careful. So it does look like Maddie Shepherd has put a time in. It's not very representative of where I think her pace is. That's currently 10th place, so maybe warming up the tyres. And then perhaps put in a run in right at the end of qualification. So just over 2 minutes to go. Currently Taubiti leading, Noig's in 2nd, Van Osch in 3rd, Paws in 4th, Masaryk in 5th. As Van Osch crosses the line and heads down to turn 1, braking as hard as possible. Banking does help these cars. But you need to get a little bit of rear slip to help you around these corners. And I say, you want to hit the apex, but you don't want to physically hit the apex because of those vicious curves on the inside. So Tony Taubiti coming to the end of the lap. And looking at my cheat sheet here, so Tony Taubiti currently 5th place in the championship. Has competed in 4 rounds so far. Two of his rounds, he's had a 1st and a 2nd, but unfortunately an 11th and a 15th in the others. So he's normally there or thereabouts. But it looks like he's going even quicker. Maddie Shepherd has gone to the top of the timesheets with 0.04 of a second. So maybe this lap from Taubiti is going to head to provisional pole with just under a minute to go, so he can put another lap in. So 0.05 of a second he's grabbed provisional pole. Has Noig's got anything for him? As he's coming up over the line. Noig stays in 3rd. So a big battle between this top 3 here. The top 2 separated for 0.05 of a second. That's millimeters in terms of space. So the top 6 covered by about a second. Van Osch is in the pit, so that's his last lap done. Taubiti coming into that corner, taking 2 bites at that corner. Couldn't quite get it slowed down. That sounded like a little bit of a lock-up. That rear end nearly getting away from him. And the Cooper, very distinctive with its mid-driver position. So the driver sits right in the centre of the car. So Tauviti and I believe Kanzouris is the only other drivers out on track that can possibly improve. So Tauviti is at the top, and it looks like 2nd, 3rd, 4th and 5th have not decided to go out for another go. So this looks like pole for Tauviti. So he crosses the line. And he extends his pole position by nearly 4/10 of a second, so that was an even faster lap. 128.96. The last driver to come across the line is another Cooper driver, Kostas Kanzouris. Kostas Kanzouris now 4th in the championship, and it's all to play for between 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th. Well, in fact, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th and 6th. So stays 7th. It's not able to improve, unfortunately. So that is qualification over. We have set the grid. So we're looking forward to 60 minutes of racing. It will be very interesting to see whether our drivers will suffer in the wet weather that's coming at the end of the session. So with 20 minutes to go, we will have a little bit of a sprinkling of wet weather. So how will these drivers handle the wet weather at this track, where commitment is paramount through these banked corners? So we will have to see. So Kanzouris just coming back to the pits as we switch over the session to warm-up. So our drivers are now going to take 5 minutes warm-up, but let's have a look at the starting order. Check out what we are faced, or what we're looking forward to. So Tauviti does get the top spot. Maddie Shepherd lines up in 2nd place. Noygs in 3rd. Van Osch, the only Lotus, in 4th. And then we have Masaryk in the Ferrari, Pors in the Cooper, Kanzouris in the Cooper, and Labioda in the Ferrari in 8th. Lebro in 9th in the Cooper, Brown in the Lancia D50, John van der Geest in the Cooper in 11th, and Cavallo, the only Maserati in the field, in 12th, and Ben Summers rounding out the grid in 13th in the last Cooper on the grid. So drivers just heading out for some practice laps. It will be a standing start. So our drivers are going to have to get their clutch pipe points absolutely perfect. We have had problems in the past where people have failed to get away and had to double dip the clutch because they let the revs drop too much. Now this grid should be spaced out quite significantly. And from memory, it might mean that the top 2 are possibly going to be lining up together on the front row. So it probably didn't matter whether someone got 1st and 2nd. So I'm hoping that it's 2 by 2. Sometimes a bit chaotic when it's 3 by 3. But we will see what the grid layout is in a few minutes. So if you have been joining us for this season, thank you for staying with us. We will be broadcasting more sim racing upcoming. we have a 1967 season that will be broadcast by myself. So some classic 1967 cars. Just looking up the dates for that series. So that starts on the 22nd of April, which is a Wednesday. So we will be going to tracks such as, on the provisional calendar, Mount Panorama 1967, Longford 1967. Can you spot a theme here? Clermont-Ferrand, or Ferrand rather, in France 1965. And then we have a provisional entry which is Brands Hatch. Then Mosport Park in Canada. And then the 1960s version of Watkins Glen for the final round. So that should be fun to broadcast and fun to watch as well. But we also have some leagues that are already ongoing, or some series that are already ongoing. So we've got an R Factor 2 series with the Porsche 992 Cup. That's held on Saturday. The next round is the 11th of April. And then we have the last round of the Le Mans Ultimate P2 and GT3 Championship, which is part of the World Series, which we have like 4 series throughout the year, which add up aggregate points, and whoever has the best aggregate points in the year will win the World Series. So it's the last round on the 19th of April, which is a Sunday. Then we have the next round of the Porsche Cayman GT4 World Cup with Automobilista 2. That starts, well, in fact the next round will be on the 21st of April. And then we have another series starting that's in May, the Asian Le Mans Series 2026 in R Factor 2. That starts on the 17th of May. So I'm hoping to broadcast that one. That should be some good modern prototype racing. Looking forward to that. So we are not far from finishing warm-up, where our drivers are just doing their final checks, making sure they are warmed up, thinking about where their maybe their clutch bite point is. So standing start, they're going to have to get it perfect, but 60 minutes of racing. It normally goes quite quickly in the first 15 minutes. And it then maybe a little bit of lull in the middle of the race, but there's always something dramatic that happens at the tail of these races, just to keep me on my toes. So it looks like we are wound down in warm-up. We are just about to head to the grid. So thank you for joining us at Sim Racing Online. If you want to join us for any of the races, if you fancy taking part, head to simracingonline.co.uk and sign up for any of the races that we are running. A good community, a good bunch of sim racers that all have the same goal in mind. Competitive racing in a friendly environment. It's all good fun, and we do a mixture of things. So as you see, we do historic racing, we do modern sports cars, we do a big mixture of stuff. R Factor 2, Automobilista 2, Le Mans Ultimate. So heading to the grid, it does look like it's 2x2. Slightly staggered. It is a little bit tighter than I would have imagined on the grid. Yeah, so pole will have an advantage. So Tony Talviti appears just in front there. So a final race of the season. Gonna have to wait for the flag man. And off we go for the final round. Slight slower getaways for the rest of the field. Further back, some of the Ferraris taken to the grass, but it looks like a green Cooper has managed to come out in front. So Shepard leads into the first turn. Talviti a second, side by side behind another Cooper battle. It looks like Pause and possibly the Lotus of Van Osh. So clean through the first few turns. That's good to see. So as they come up the hill for the first time. So I'm not seeing any yellow flags, which is also good to see. We want to keep this 60 minutes nice and clean. So coming down into this downhill right-hander. Slight crest. Van Osch not letting Julian Paws get away. But Van Osch has been shadowed by a Ferrari. I saw a slow start in Ferrari heading onto the dirt. It looks like he had a little bit of a wiggle. And Noix looks like he's on the case. So will that Ferrari be able to draft past that Lotus on the main straight? So patience. Van Osch goes in a little bit deep as Noix just runs a little bit over the curb. But it looks like he has good momentum onto the straight for the first time. Directly behind that Lotus, who places his car in the centre of the track. It looks slightly tight, doesn't it, when you're coming down here? Looks like we have a spinner at the back. I think it's Labioda that's unfortunately span at the last turn as Labioda gets going again. Gaten Noix is now up to 4th place and chases after Paws in that Cooper. So it's Cooper, Shepherd, Cooper, Talviti, Cooper, Paws, and the Ferrari of Noix, and then Van Osch in 5th place. Kanzarus is not dropping too far back in the 6th, but it was a little bit of a messy start for a few people. I think some people had some slower starts. They didn't quite get the clutch bite point correct, but Talviti is shadowing Shepherd. The top 2 look like they are away from the rest of the field, and you can see the battle behind for 3rd and 4th. So taking it easy in the first few laps. Fastest lap of the race is 1:36. But that's sure to come down into the 20s. And Noix is fancying a podium position here. So strong run. Noix has been a little bit unlucky. And had to make up some time. He was 2nd last time out. This is actually his 2nd round of the series. So he's doing well, getting a handle on these cars. So Paws looks like he went a little bit defensive. Fastest lap of the race at 1:29.6 by Talviti in 2nd place. So the screaming Ferrari of Masaryk coming down into turn 1. Can he get it stopped? He can. A slight bit of oversteer as he gets to the apex, but he's managed to pass John van der Geest. So that's screaming Ferrari. Very distinctive. Now Masaryk goes chasing after Phil Brown in the Lotus, the Lancia rather. The Lancia D50, who's another screaming car. So John van der Geest now playing catch up back in 10th place. So the blue Cooper, slightly dirty, slightly rusty. But here we go again with Gaten Noix. Now all over the back of Paws. I think it's just a matter of time. It seems like he has the pace to pass. Being patient, perhaps staying close enough so he can get a run onto the straight. Slight hit of the curb, didn't seem to unsettle the car. Paws runs slightly wide, but no hint of oversteer too much. Paws heads to the inside of the track. This means that possibly an outside move for this Ferrari. I haven't seen an outside move yet, so this should be interesting. He does get over the top of that Cooper before he even gets to turn 1, is able to take the apex. I was a little bit worried when I hear the early downshifts, because these cars can be quite brittle in terms of engine. We have had a couple of cars that have been set alight. So Julian Paws, can he stay with Noix? So the top 2 are away. Shepherd has now pulled out a 2-second gap from Talviti in 2nd, but Noix maybe thinks he's got something in reserve to catch up to that battle for the top 2. Maybe improving on his 2nd place. So back to the battle between Phil Brown, who's now past John van der Geest. Well, in fact, it's Masaryk that's gone up past Brown, so maybe a slight mistake from Brown that's let Masaryk through. So Phil Brown with John van der Geest in pursuit. The two blue cars, Lancia D50 and the Cooper. So we've got groups forming around the track. And it's all the way down the field as well. I'm looking on my track map. There are little groups very close together. So this circuit providing some good racing. And some good close racing as well. And much of it has been very, very clean. So Van Osch is now staying with... That's Talviti that's dropped back. So what happens? Did Talviti make a mistake? He was in second not long ago. So that means Noig gets up to his personal best in the second. Pause now is in third. Talviti in fourth. So that was unspotted by the cameras. Not sure what happened there. And Van Osch following on in fifth. So let's have a look at the relative gaps. It's much easier to see who is close together. So John van der Geest fancies having a go at Phil Brown in the Lancia. Good battle between these two. We have seen that all the passes have been done when you can keep the nose at the rear. So Gert Van Osch is going past Talviti. I wonder if Talviti is suffering a little bit of damage. That looked like Talviti was just letting that Lotus through. So this will change the championship quite significantly for second down to fifth. Remember, there is only points for the first 5 drivers, so 8, 6, 4, 3 and 2, using the old point system. So now Noix is second. That 4.3 gap, I'm keeping an eye on it. Let's see if he can actually close on the leader. So Talviti does come into the pit, so I wonder if this is to fix tyres damage. Perhaps he suffered from a little bit of suspension damage. But this may be a retirement. It's hard to come back from 11th place to get back to 5th place for the points, so this is going to dramatically change the championship order. And out of the pits he comes again. So did I not notice a penalty? Was Talviti coming in for a drive-through? Perhaps he was. So track temperature up to a nice toasty 42 degrees. It's quite slightly colder air temperature of a 22. But it's going to be set to get a little bit colder. We're only 10 minutes into this race. Phil Brown at the moment seems to be holding off John van der Geest. So with just under 51 minutes to go. That's a yellow flag. Where is that yellow flag? May have already cleared. So a DNF for Tony Talviti, it seems. So did Tony Talviti have a little bit of an accident? Need to get my track map back so I can see what's going on. There we go. So yellow flag of Labiota in 11th place is embedded in the fence at the moment. So I don't know whether that looked like that was an accident, because he was missing all of his wheels. So that's an unfortunate way to end the season for Labiota, which means that he will score no points from this round. So Labiota back in 8th place in the championship, so no points for him. So Gaetan Noix still is unable to close that gap to the lead. He is about 4.5 seconds. So that Ferrari stretching its legs now that he has a little bit of space. Now looking at the fastest lap times, Maddie Shepherd still is the fastest driver on the circuit at the moment with a 1:29.2. So representative times nearly as close as qualifying. So I'm just getting a message from Talviti. He repaired to fix the rear, but it was so loose. So that's a shame for Talviti, who put up a good fight throughout this season, albeit there are some technical problems with the track. So settle in for what will be 49 minutes of coverage to watch these cars going around this lovely circuit of Zandvoort. I actually prefer the older version of Zandvoort. It has a better flow than the newer version, where they've tightened up the circuit quite significantly, particularly in that banked hairpin, or where the hairpin is for us. It's now a banked turn for the modern drivers. I don't believe it's taking part in Formula 1 going forwards. I think it's off the calendar. Again, we've got 11th place in the barrier. Looks like spun around Ben Summers. So maybe a slight loose rear end. Is that car grabbing at all? We did see that he was grabbing a lot in the Dundrod race, but he heads up the straight. No intention of coming into the pits, so just a slight mistake from Ben Summers. If we head back to this battle between Labro and Masaryk, so Masaryk has caught up to this Cooper. Now I think we did see a battle right towards the end between Labro and Masaryk. Checking my cheat sheet here. We did indeed. They were 6th and 7th, and they were separated by under a second at the line. So Phil Brown now, Jim Cavallo behind. So John Van der Geest has now passed Phil Brown. And Phil Brown has the Maserati of Cavallo just ahead. That's a very wide line. So here we go. Battle resumed. Labro takes to the inside to defend. That was slightly tight. I think it was maybe a little bit of a late defence. So that was slightly messy. Masaryk was already committed coming down the inside. And with these cars, you can't really make late moves. So that's a little bit unfortunate for Masaryk. But the battle consists, or raging between Phil Brown, who is now dropped to further position, but Cavallo is just ahead. Looks like these drivers are well matched, but the first, second and third are really spaced out. So through these sweeping turns, I'm going to have to see if I can think of these names. Phil Brown was fancying a go around the outside there. Not a lot of grip up the hill. So this should be, if I've got my corners correct. So this is the Tunnel Oost. Just gone through. Masaryk now dropped down behind John Van der Geest. Maybe feeling a little bit slightly aggrieved that Labro kept his position and didn't possibly give the position back, but will that come down to a steward's decision? But Masaryk coming up the main straight. So Masaryk, this time John Van der Geest leaves a bit more space around that wide line. They were side by side coming into turn one. It didn't feel like hanging it around the outside. So Masaryk now pushing back up towards Labro, possibly in 6th place, but 5.4 seconds to find. So, quarter of the race already done. I'm still looking at the clouds. When is that rain going to appear? We did say it was going to be in the last 20 minutes. What the admin haven't said is how hard the rain is going to be. So maybe it might be a tiny little bit of a sprinkle. And as I'm looking at my temperatures, 42 degrees is quite hot for a track temperature. So will the how long will it take for the grip to disappear? So a penalty for Ben Summers. Is that track limits? That could be, because he's out he looks like he's in turns 2 and 3 at the moment. So that lovely engine note of that Lancia D50 nearly got it stopped, but nearly rear-ended Jim Cavallo. So it looked like Phil Brown wanted to be on the piece of tarmac that Jim Cavallo was on. So that lost his momentum coming up the straight, unfortunately. And he's not really going to gain an awful lot coming up to turn 1. So he needs to be a little bit cleaner in those fast turns out the back. So that high revving Lancia D50, an absolutely beautiful engine note. Is Phil Brown fancying a go up the inside? I thought it was maybe going to have a little bit of an out-braking manoeuvre, but that entry to that hairpin is quite tight. So you just need to stay under that rear, but not through the rear. We don't want any rear ending. So Phil Brown needs to get closer if he's got any chance of staying in the draft coming out of the final corner. So a tighter line for Phil Brown. That's Jim Cavallo. Slightly wider line coming through. You go through this left-hander. So the fast part of the circuit looks like Jim Cavallo has possibly got this part of the circuit a bit more sus than Phil Brown. A lot of momentum, but Phil Brown is getting closer all the time. So under a second, so 0.5 of a second. Possibly need to be a little closer than that to have a go into turn 1. So Phil Brown, now he's right on the boot lid. But looks like Jim Cavallo again is able to get on the gas pedal a bit quicker. I don't know whether Phil Brown is losing momentum coming into that final corner. Maybe thinking that he was just about to rear end that Maserati of Jim Cavallo and has to lift off, which loses all his momentum on to the straight. So as I said before, we've had battles all the way down the field. This is 9th and 10th. The gap out front has now risen to 5 seconds. And everyone else is pretty spaced out, so maybe a couple of cool down laps for Phil Brown, thinking about where he could possibly overtake a bit later on. So if we go through the field, we don't normally see the leader because she is out front. Maddie Shepherd, another fastest lap, now down to 1:29.0. Then we have Gaten Noyes in second now. That was that a Maserati? I think that was a Maserati just recovering from the grass. So looks like Cavallo probably was possibly pushing a little bit too hard. Trust me to switch away from that battle, and then suddenly, unfortunately, Jim had a little bit of an off. So let's see if Jim can catch up again. Ben Summers got another penalty, so perhaps that's speeding in the pit lane now. You possibly will get track limit penalties if you go over the pit line. There is no barrier that separates the pit lane and the track. So that is a shame. So we'll have to see if Ben Summers comes in the pits to serve that. So Lebro in 6th place. We can see that stalking yellow Ferrari in the background. So Masaryk is catching slowly but surely onto the back of Lebro. But Gaten Noyes dropping even further behind Shepherd. And a recovering Jim Cavallo in that Maserati. Kicking himself. So Maddie Shepherd from the tail of timesheets hasn't been off the podium apart from one round where we had that technical problem in round 4. So three wins and 1 second place. Gaten Noyes has taken part in one other race in the last round. He was on the second step of the podium. This will equal his personal best. As we see, it looks like Kostas Kanzouras trying to catch up to the Lotus of Van Osch. 40 minutes remaining. So as I said, there's always a little bit of a lull in the middle of the race until things start to kick off a little. As the tyres start to wear down, the fuel loads go down. There's no refueling, there's no pit stop changes. So flat out to the Lebro, getting very out of shape coming out of that corner. Takes a wider line into the hairpin, and that's stalking Ferrari of Masaryk in the background. So keeping it neat and tidy around the last turn. This is the car we want to focus on, because he is catching Lebro hand over fist. Lebro, the last lap time of 1:30.9. Masaryk about 7/10 quicker on that last lap, so he's been closing. New best lap time for Maddie Shepherd, 1:28.8, so pushing on, not lifting off in her final race this season. I did think she would maybe settle for maybe a podium, but leading from the front. So leading from the front. But that Ferrari of Lebro, rather the Cooper of Lebro, and Masaryk just behind in the Ferrari. Now Masaryk maybe has to think of something a little bit different. Maybe has to get further alongside into turn 1 next time by. So possibly it's no way through up here, it's a bit tight. So Lebro, it's all done by that corner. I did see that he was out of shape last time out. He was struggling to get on the power. Oh, he had an unsettled car coming through that sequence of corners, and Masaryk was able to use the higher line, stay out of trouble, and just go around the outside. So that's a superb move by Masaryk. So can Masaryk now pull away? We know that that Cooper is a match in top speed for the other cars on the track. So now Lebro is in chase. So clipping those curbs is not great. So we go on board with Lebro as we come through these final few turns. So we need to stay under the rear lid, or the rear of that Ferrari, and get on the throttle as quick as possible to get a good exit onto the straight. So as they go onto the straight, just under 3/10 of a second. Is that enough? Masaryk doesn't feel the need to go defensive. So not close enough. So 3/10 of a second is not close enough. Down into turn 1. So I feel that Lebro is possibly pushing a little bit too hard in this early section of the lap. This is where he got a little bit squirrely before. So gets close on the brakes, but then gets a little bit out of shape coming out of that turn for a third time. So that Cooper's not handling well out that corner, which means he doesn't get a lot of momentum coming out of there as the circuit turns to fast sweeping corners in the latter section of the lap, sectors 2 and 3. And Masaryk is able to pull out a little bit of a gap. So meanwhile the lead is up to 7.4 seconds. Third is another 16 seconds back, so Pause is holding station in third. Van Osch in fourth. Like perhaps Lebro just clipped the inside curb there. Masaryk is pulling out a little gap. Not by much, but just by a little. I'm also looking at the battle between 6th and 7th. Actually, this is the closest battle on the track because everyone else is pretty much spread out. Ben Summers goes a lap down in 11th. First of our lapped cars. He's not having the greatest day out the back. I wonder if he's actually cleared that penalty. So again, Lebro not able to get close enough into turn 1. But let's step through the field. So Maddie Shepherd in first. Serene and out front, a gap of 7.3 seconds back to Gaten Noyes in second place, equaling the best he's done so far, and looks like that is Ben Summers, lapped car just ahead of him. So Julian Pause in the action early on, but has settled in third place. You can see Van Osch is not escaped in fourth. So that Lotus of Van Osch, that very unique looking Lotus, has still got someone to chase. So that white Cooper is the carrot on the stick, basically. So Costas Kanzouris coming through the latter section of the lap. That is John van der Geest, I think, that's gone around at fast sweepers. That means that Phil Brown goes through. That's unfortunate for John van der Geest. He was doing well. As Ben Summers comes into the pits, possibly to serve a penalty, probably a stop and go. So that's unfortunate for John van der Geest, dropping down the order. So it doesn't matter that these drivers out the back are not driving for points. Doesn't mean the battles are any less fun to watch. So now the Lebro has been passed by Masaryk. He's pulled out enough of a gap so he stays clean up the main straight, which is that passing place. We've seen all the passing places or the overtakes into turn 1, apart from coming into the hairpin where Masaryk went around the outside. So heading further down the grid, Jim Cavallo now out on his own, probably ruining that mistake. He's still now 6.4 seconds behind John van der Geest. But these drivers have managed to get back to the track. The only casualty we saw, it was Labioda that was missing a wheel. We actually didn't see the cause of the accident, but possibly hitting that that catch fence, or in this case just a fence back then. Hitting that fence very, very hard. So I don't think the pit crew would have put the wheel back on. Then we had our second retirement, so unfortunately Teo suffering a little bit of damage and couldn't quite get it repaired, and decided to pull into the pits and retire. So John van der Geest in 9th. After that mistake, he's got some catching up to do. So it looks like he does have a pace advantage on Phil Brown ahead, so it might be just a matter of time before they are joined in battle once again. So Van Osch, you can see my cheat sheet again. So Van Osch currently second in the championship. Will this consolidate his second in the championship, or does he need a little bit more? It is very, very close at the top between second and I believe 5th place. So second down to 5th place could all be changing hands in this final round as we head to nearly about half distance. I'm still looking at the sky. There doesn't seem to be any clouds appearing. Oh, there are clouds appearing. It's when they start to get a little bit grey we've got to start to worry. So Julian Paws in second place. Van Osch is catching behind. 2 seconds. Not far away. But now Lebro out the back of the circuit, chopping away from Masaryk. So Masaryk was able to repass, and it is away. So Costas Kanzouris, 10.1 seconds to catch. Costas 4th in the championship, so he's one of the drivers that could get in the mix of perhaps being on one of the last steps of the podium. But it does look like perhaps Julian Paws is doing enough to maybe secure 3rd place in the championship. I don't know whether he's actually going to jump a place or not. We'll have to do the calculations a bit later on. I don't want to curse the drivers by filling in the points. Sometimes it's best to wait until the last minute to fill in those points and see where we are. So Van Osch is catching Paws, now down to 1.8 seconds. So that Lotus, as the fuel load goes down, it's getting faster and faster and faster. So I wonder whether Paws might pick up his pace if he sees that Lotus getting even closer than he is right now. So we're exactly at half distance. 30 minutes to go. No sign of rain just yet. As I say, it may spice things up a little. We may actually have the drivers catching up or closing their gaps. Who's going to be our wet weather specialist? Who is going to be the driver that perhaps plays it a little bit safe? So championship, 2nd down to 5th is to be decided. in this last 30 minutes of the season. So it's been a great season. I've really enjoyed broadcasting this season. It's right up my alley for the historic cars, many of which are spread out through the 1950s season. Some of them debuting right at the start, some of them debuting right at the end. And there's been a couple of tracks that they would have actually competed on. So some of these cars would have actually competed at Pescara, which was our first track, and an epic one at that. 25 kilometers of public roads. An epic circuit to start out with. So drifting into the last turn. See what I mean about those curbs? You don't want to hit them too much. So now a bit lonely for Bro out the back of the circuit, but pacing himself. So Van Osch, this battle is soon to heat up. The gap still stable at 1.8 seconds. So Van Osch, looking at his tally, he has 3 podiums this season. He's been able to compete in all 5 of the races. So he's got 2 second places and a third, a 5th and a 12th. So that 12th place probably ruining, dropping a few points, but he is second in the championship. He is 3 points clear of Julian Paws, but that may change. So he possibly has done some of the calculations in his head, and he knows that if he passes Julian ahead, then he will be safe in second place in the championship. But it's going to be very, very close. I might even put the provisional positions in so I can see who might be coming out on top. But then I have to change them again a bit later on. But we will see. We will see. So Van Osch getting closer and closer. We know the drivers need to be within about 0.2 of a second to have a go into turn 1, but is turn 1 the place that he's thinking to pass? Maybe having a little bit of a think about where he's quicker. If you spend so long behind a driver, you can possibly find out where they're a little bit weaker than you. Maybe exploit those weaknesses around the circuit. Maybe push them into a little bit of a mistake. It's sometimes quite satisfying to push a driver into a mistake after laps and laps of pressure. So coming down into turn 1 now, the gap is down to 1.4 seconds. So Julian Paws just ahead in that Cooper, that white Cooper. Thankfully our painter extraordinaire was able to, Jules De Silva was able to put some different paint jobs in for the Cooper, because the Coopers that come with this mod unfortunately are mostly green. So Julian Paws having to stay a little bit calm, but that gap is coming down, 1.4 seconds. It won't be long before that Lotus is breathing down his neck. And I'm looking on the map, they are clear from lapped cars getting in the way and possibly slowing them down for a little while. But the rest of the field are pretty much spread out. First and second are nearly the length of the main straight away from each other. The gap is up to 9 seconds, so it doesn't look like Noix has anything for Shepherd, and perhaps is settling in for when this wet weather arrives. So 25 minutes to go. That gap has stabilised 1.5 seconds. It'll be interesting to see what this track is like in the wet. I don't think I've actually raced here in the wet. The banked corners should help a little. But we'll have to see what it's like in these cars specifically. Well matched to this circuit. So looking at our circuit, it did say, I didn't think that Zandvoort was actually running Formula 1, but looking at the Wikipedia, it says it's running to 2026. I thought it was actually off the calendar, but apparently not. It ran 1950 to 1953. That is, I believe that's Van Osch in the background. Was that the Lotus just going a little bit wide? It was. That's unfortunate. He was 1.5 seconds behind, so maybe pushing a little too hard on the brakes. And I could see a little puff of dirt, and I could hear the idling of a Lotus, so I don't think he actually hit anything. So that's a real shame. That battle was hotting up a little. No signs of rain at the moment, so it wasn't to do with rain, but it was just pushing on. So perhaps that Lotus has become a little harder to handle as the fuel load comes down. Maddie Shepherd now siding her way through the lapped cars. Her next target is John van der Geest in 9th. Van Osch now recovering a little. Now he's got 11 seconds to find. So that is a shame. So Phil Brown now on his own out in 8th. He's dropped John van der Geest. I cannot see a Cooper in the background. So the Dutch Grand Prix, as I said, 1950 to 1953. As Maddie Shepherd is coming out to lap John van der Geest. Then 1955, 1958 to 71. So maybe some of these cars would be competing around this circuit at that point. Then we had the 1970s, so 1973 to 1985. 2021 when they returned with that banked turn layout in 2021 up until the present day. So the other cars series that compete at the circuit at the moment is the GT World Challenge Europe. We also have the DTM, the ADAC GT Masters, and we also had one former race around here, the Race of the Netherlands, the World Touring Car Series, the FIA World Touring Car Series, held between 2000 and 2019. Well, 2007 and 2018 and 2019. Ben Summers just letting the Lotus of Gert Van Osch get through. And the Masters of Formula 3 from 91 to 2006. 2009 to 2016. So a circuit well suited to single seaters. The layout has changed quite significantly. It's lost some of its flow from before. So some of the corners tightened up. They started to put chicanes in 1980s when the cars got very, very quick. So if you look at this this circuit on the map, it is a stone's throw, in theory, from the beach. So and if you witnessed one of the Formula 1 races in the, I can't remember which one it was, in the when it returned to the calendar, it was an absolute washout. The circuit was absolutely soaked. So I'm just trying to find, there was actually some I was going to say controversy. It wasn't controversy so much. I believe there was an accident back in the 60s. Cannot remember who it was. I can't seem to find that detail. But I think there was a fatality back in the 1960s, but I can't actually find it. Or at least there was some horrible crashes which ended up with cars aflame. We haven't seen any cars aflame today, which is good to see. I'm glad we haven't seen any cars on fire. People downshifting a bit too early. Oh gosh, I'm looking at I'm looking at the bottom of the Wikipedia, and there is a few fatal accidents. We do have a 1952, 1957, and 1958. 1967, 1968, and a few fatalities at Zandvoort, unfortunately, as Shepherd puts in another fastest lap of the race, a 128, sorry, 0.69. So Masaryk pushing on now has a Lotus in front. No, that is not a Lotus, that is a Cooper, that is a lapped car. I thought he was getting even closer. It is, no, it is 4th position, that is Kanzurus ahead of him. So Mazarick has fought his way back up. This could be a close battle, as the rain is probably going to arrive in short order. So we're under when the rain was going to appear. I'm not seeing any grey clouds, so was the admin telling fibs? Was the admin telling fibs? So here's me waiting for the rain, and no rain is going to appear. So we'll have to see. Maybe there was a chance of rain, but maybe we aren't going to get any. Maybe here's the thing, because it doesn't look like any dark clouds coming over the horizon. So Mazarick now has a Cooper for company. Will he pass exactly in the same place that he passed Lebreau? But Lebreau did make a mistake coming into that hairpin, which meant that Mazarick had the full run around the outside. So Michael Mazarick, that is a yellow flag of 7th place. That is Lebreau. It was temporary, and he hasn't spun. So maybe just having trouble getting into that hairpin. That seems to be cursed. But Mazarick now is got a Cooper in his sights to get that final point. So it will be 2 points for 5th place. So Kanzurus needs these points. Currently 4th in the 4th on the road. So this may actually decide a couple of positions if Mazarick can take some points away from Kanzurus. So championship deciding. Mazarick getting a good run off that final corner in the draft of that Cooper. Does Kanzurus decide to go to the middle of the track? I think he does, but not quite close enough. That Ferrari looks very good on the brakes, but not quite close enough. Maybe the next lap. So this might be a matter of time. Again, look, Mazarick is getting better grip out that corner. Those Coopers do not handle this section very, very well, it seems. But it was this section of the track that Mazarick felt like a run around the outside, and he does get good momentum with a wide exit. So he's spotting maybe a couple of weaknesses from Kanzurus ahead. So as we come down to the final quarter of this race, let's see who the biggest winners and losers have been throughout this race as it gets closer and closer. It looks like Julian Paws was actually the biggest winner. He was able to get up 3 places from where he started on the grid and is up to 3rd. Unfortunately, Mazarick has dropped down 1 place from where he started, but he might be able to rectify that in a few laps time. So closer now than he was last lap, I think. Just needs to get it neat and tidy, get this nose in. Very tight line coming through the final corner. But Kanzurus gets a better exit, it seems. So coming down the main straight. Let's see what the gap is. So closer this time is Mazarick, thinking of going to the inside. Shapes up for the look. He steps on the brakes and comes down the inside. That was simpler than I thought. Maybe a slight lock-up. So, great views from our drivers. As Mazarick pulled out early on that straight to kind of signify to Kanzurus that he was going to have a little bit of a go on the brakes, and he always looked like he was going to be doing okay. It looks like, is that that looked like John Van der Geest. Did John Van der Geest and Ben Summers have a little bit of a coming together there at the back of the field? Or perhaps they went to the scene of each other's accident. So Mazarick now up into the points. Kanzurus now is down out of the points. So if he stays in 6th place, he will not score this round. So Cavallo now, John Van der Geest has now fallen into the clutches of Jim Cavallo in that Maserati. So battling over 9th and 10th place. So differing lines coming into that hairpin. Some people prefer taking a wider line in. Some people prefer taking mid-track. So Masaryk now pulling a little bit away from Cancer as now that lap. Now he was able to pass the last lap. But the closest battle on track at the moment. So Masaryk unfortunately having to fight his way back through the field. I'm sure if he hadn't have had that coming together with the Lebro, he would have been a little bit further up. So a little bit unfortunate. So could have done much more. But there's a lot of time to make up. So does Masaryk perhaps feel like he has enough laps? He's got 13 minutes to find. 13 minutes to find 7.4 seconds to catch Van Osch in fourth. So does he fancy even more? Ben Summers is really having a struggle with that final turn. That seems to be cursed. He's not able to keep the Cooper under control in that final turn, and he goes around again. Now we have seen late on in the races sometimes the Coopers do become a little bit hard to handle. They do get a little bit squirrely, as I say, but Jim Cavallo now has passed, unseen by us, has passed John Van der Geest. Does John Van der Geest perhaps have something for Jim Cavallo in these final just over 12 minutes of this race? So again, thank you for joining us at simracingonline.co.uk. It's been an absolute pleasure to broadcast this series, and it's been absolutely brilliant to see the performance that these drivers have put on for us in these old cars, or historic cars at these historic tracks. It's always good. I always find that the historic cars and even the historic tracks have a little bit of a better flow than some of the modern circuits. So Kansouris getting dropped by Masaryk, but Masaryk going to keep an eye on that gap. 7.3 seconds. Let's see if he can catch the Lotus of Van Osch. It may change the championship positions as we go. So I knew that I shouldn't have put the provisional order in, because it has changed. So Masaryk now up to 5th place, and that will be 2 points on the board. So John Van der Geest still not letting that Jim Cavallo get away. But I can see Julian Paul's just in the background. That's possibly going to split between these guys when he comes to lap them. Maybe John Van der Geest is maybe suffering with handling problems, and saw that he got a little bit out of shape coming out the hairpin. It's characteristic I've seen of the Cooper this season is that late on the race that it does kind of get a little bit out of shape very, very easily, and you have to be very quick on the opposite lock, it seems. So the lead now up to 13 seconds. Top three really spread out. So it's still Shepherd. Should come down to just over 10 minutes. Shepherd has led from the start. Noigs had to fight his way through to second place. Paws is now in third. So you see John Van der Geest trying to hang on to the coattails of Cavallo for this last race of the season. So I did say we were going out with a bang. We haven't had any bangs just yet. A couple of drivers have had a couple of offs, but nothing too spectacular, or at least that we've seen on screen. I remember we had a series here not long ago. I'm just trying to remember what cars it was. But I remember there was a couple of drivers that are actually competing today. I think they were... they ended up... in fact, I think we did run this track for the Group 5 DRM series. So 70s and 80s sports cars around this circuit. It provided some good entertainment, but we did have a couple of drivers that ended up over the hills. One of the drivers, I think, was Julian Paws, ended up over one of these hills out the back of the circuit and nearly came down the hillside into the path of oncoming traffic. Had the clinging onto the brake for dear life, hoping that he didn't run into traffic, but so unfortunate there. But it's providing good entertainment for these 1950s cars, well suited to the circuit. So John van der Geest has really stayed with Cavallo. Can he get an overlap coming through these final couple of corners? Maybe putting Jim Cavallo off line. In fact, he does get... I didn't expect him to actually pass in that last section, so Jim Cavallo was on the back foot there, and I think John van der Geest was able to make a little bit of a pass. So now John van der Geest up to 9th place. So again, looking at the gap between 4th and 5th, that hasn't closed an awful lot in the last few minutes, as we see John van der Geest locking up into turn 1. Maybe putting Jim Cavallo off a little as it goes a little bit wide. So 7 seconds from 4th and 5th. That gap is not closing significantly fast, and we're now down to just over 8 minutes to go. No rain clouds. The clouds haven't arrived. Maybe a little bit of a bait and switch from the admin. I did let some of the drivers know that there possibly would be wet weather in this race, and I had a lot of drivers a bit apprehensive and not looking forward to the possibility of driving the circuit in the wet. But no moisture has appeared, and probably won't. Although it would be quite funny if it appears in the last 5 minutes with an absolute deluge. But so Matty Shepherd now coming up to lap Romain Lebreau for 7th place. So Masaryk now pulling out a bit of a gap on Kanzouras. Now he has those points for 5th, which means the championship points do not go to Kanzouras this time. As I said, this may change the championship order for 2nd. Unfortunately, Romain Lebreau possibly too generous coming into that turn. Not a lot of grip out there. He possibly won't lose a position. He's going to stay in 7th as we see him recovering, because 8th place is further down the road. That's unfortunate. He can go side by side through some of these turns, but he was far too generous and let the leader through, but not a lot of grip, and he ran out of road a bit too, and that means he was in the fence. So Van Osch has put up a good fight in this race. He was closing on pause earlier for 3rd, but dropped back, and that gap has not reduced, 13 seconds. So maybe Van Osch has decided to maybe settle for 4th place. But Masaryk has been the man on the move. But again, I'm not seeing that gap decrease significantly. It was around 7 seconds for a little bit, but it's now back up to 7.5. So as we come down to the last 5 minutes of this race, we're not seeing anything too dramatic coming down to the finishing line. 2nd place is 14 seconds behind the leader. Here we see the leader. So Maddie Shepherd out on her own. Has been putting in some good races this season. Her forte is really historic races. And I'm hoping that a lot of drivers do come back for the next series that we run in historic cars. So we're heading to the year 1967. So we're trying something a little different with the 1967 series. We have, I think, 6 cars in the... there'll be 6 cars on the road and 6 circuits on the calendar. And the drivers need to pick a different car for each round. So they have to pick the car for each specific round. A little bit of strategy in there. We had that with the Group 5 where drivers had to maybe pick the right car for the right circuit. So that's what's going to happen with the 1967 series. It unfortunately keeps me on my toes, because it means that different drivers, different cars every single round. So just to make things a little bit harder. So Jim Cavallo now trying to chase John van der Geest after unfortunately letting him slip down this particular part of the circuit a few laps ago. Should come up straight. So as I said, the first part of this circuit, the first sector, has stayed pretty static. There's been slight adjustments in the earlier years, but these back corners are very reminiscent. Or these back corners, I think, have stayed around. It's this part of the circuit that has changed. It's been widened for Formula 1, and then you have this banked corner which is even wider, and it has a couple of different lines I've seen from Formula 1. Drivers are able to kind of stay up in the banking, and then we got this section of the course which turned into a bit of a chicane fest. There is still corners which require full commitment, blind crests and unseen apexes. So, but there's a couple more chicanes in the circuit than in 1967. Ruins the flow a bit, I think, but I'm glad we have this version that we can play for ourselves at home. So Noyes in second place, still putting in 130s. He's on the leader's pace, but not closing at all. So settling for second position. So Jim Cavallo not able to stay with John van der Geest ahead for that 9th and 10th place respectively. But Maddie Shepherd kicking on out the back of the circuit. I'm just wondering when she's going to cross the finishing line. So a lap time of 1:28. So it may mean that we only have one lap next time by. Actually, it may go to a second lap. So there may be 2 laps when she comes to the line. We'll have to see. So in the 1967 series, we're going to be heading to places like Mount Panorama, which should be a really big challenge. Especially the 1967 version, which has the flat out section all the way to the last corner. So no chicanes to be had. We also have Clermont-Ferrand, which circuit that's normally referred to as Charade in France. It's going to be the 1965 version, which again has corners like we do have here, lots of bank turns, but a few more than we have here. It's a long circuit, so memorization of where you are on the circuit is going to be imperative. So Jim Cavallo coming through the final corner. So Maddie Shepherd has possibly started her final lap, but we have to see. 1 minute to go. Shepherd leads, Noyes second, Paws third, Van Osch in fourth, and Masaryk now closed that gap down to 6 seconds. So something happened to Van Osch that last time around. Maybe a slight mistake. Maybe paced himself to the end, but Jim Cavallo fancies perhaps going out with a flourish. So we've been with this battle for a little amount of time because it is the closest battle on track at the moment. It's a lot of understeer for Jim Cavallo. Those tyres are probably screaming. Couldn't quite get it out the hairpin. So Maddie Shepherd comes across the line with 15 seconds to go. So we'll go for another lap. So hopefully people relied on putting in enough fuel. There are no fuel pit stops in this. So Jim Cavallo still shadowing John van der Geest for that 9th place. There is a car up ahead that I can see on my track map. I think that is Ben Summers. That is a lap. He's a lap down on these guys. So possibly maybe letting them by on the straight. So I was expecting a bit of a showdown at the end of this race, but it was not as dramatic as some of the other rounds that we've had. So Ben Summers heads to the inside of the course Gotta be very careful not cutting that pit entry. Possibly that's where the penalties have come from. So Jim Cavallo, doesn't fancy a shake up to turn 1, not quite close enough. Maddie Shepherd coming through the final couple of turns. So our championship winner managed to clinch the championship in the 5th round and is going to round out the final turn. So from pole to the victory. In fact, she was on the front row. It wasn't pole position, was it? It was Taviti that got the pole, but 2nd place. She was on the front row. Gaten Noyes slightly adrift, but had to work his way back up to 2nd place, so that's a good 2nd place. It's his second place in this series, so good for Gaten Noyes as well. We should see coming over Julian Paws. He was in the action early on, but he's going to come across the line in 3rd. As we see Phil Brown already a lap down, so he's going to come across the line in 8th place. So John van der Geest managed to keep ahead of Jim Cavallo up until the final. So John van der Geest comes across the line to round out the top 9, and Jim Cavallo rounds out the top 10. Ben Summers coming across the line with Masaryk, just lapping him in this final section of the course. Wow, how about that? How about that? Absolutely great round out to the season. I really have enjoyed broadcasting this race, and I hope you have enjoyed watching it. So let's have a look at where we are with our results, and then hopefully I can generate some points as well. So let's see if we can get the finishing order from me rather. So a couple of people doing donuts on the main straight. So let's see, the race was won by Maddie Shepherd. Gaten Noyes comes home in 2nd. Julian Paws is in 3rd, with Gert Van Osch in 4th. Michael Masaryk fighting his way back up to 5th place, with Kostas Kanzaras not far behind in 6th. 7th place is Romain Lebreau. Phil Brown, slightly anonymous this round, in 8th. And we have John van der Geest in 9th. And Jim Cavallo not far behind in 10th place. Remember, points only go down to 5th place in this series. So the last on the road, I'm just updating the points in the background. Hopefully it all works. And we have the final positions on the track. So Ben Summers did come home a few laps down, but we did have DNFs from Marius Labioda and unfortunately Tony Talviti 12th and 13th respectively. So what has this done to the championship? What has this done to the championship? I haven't actually looked at it myself to see if it's actually changed an awful lot. So we did see that 2nd down to 5th was close. What are we going to be finding for the final position? So, looking at it, what do we see? Maddie Shepherd was your winner, now out front, 38 points. Wasn't able to be caught this round. Gert Van Osch did escape. Did manage to stay ahead of Julian Paws in the end. So 21 points to 19, so very, very close. Kanzaras, with dropping down to 6th place and not scoring this round, meant that stays on 14 points, level with Tony Talviti, who also didn't score this round. But 2 second places brought Gaten Noyes a little bit further towards the front, but not able to overhaul 5th place, too far behind. I'm sure if Gaten Noyes was actually here in the start of the season, he would have perhaps been one of the front runners with 2 second places in the last 2 rounds. Michael Masaryk coming home in 7th place. And then we have Marius Labioda in 8th, Romain Lebreau in 9th, and Jim Cavallo in 10th. So, very interesting round, a very interesting series. As I say, we are running a 1967 series similar to this, coming up in April, at the end of April. So on the calendar we have 11th of April with the Porsche 992 Cup R-Factor 2. So that's on a Saturday. The next round of the final round of the Le Mans Ultimate Championship will be taking place at COTA, so Circuit of the Americas, on the 19th of April. That's a Sunday. I will be in the booth with Rob Milliken for that, so join us here back on that channel. So the P2 and the GT3 Championship is all to play for, part of the World Series. 21st of April will be Automobilista 2 Porsche Cayman GT4 World Cup. So 21st of April, that's a Tuesday. And then we have the start of our Formula 1 1967 Championship starting on Wednesday the 22nd of April, and I will be broadcasting that myself. That will be fun to watch, so look out for that. And our last thing on the agenda is the 17th of May, which is a Sunday. It will be the Asian Le Mans Series, so that should be LMP3s and GTEs, I think. If I look down the list, so yes, it is LMP3s and GTEs. That should be a fun watch, so looking forward to that. So I have been your host, Neil Wood, for this series, and for upcoming series I will see you back on track. I've really enjoyed broadcasting this series, and it's right in my wheelhouse, as they say. I've really enjoyed the action that these drivers have put on show for us. So if you fancy joining us on track, head to simracingonline.co.uk and you can take part. We mainly use free content for all the stuff that we do. Sometimes we do decide to maybe throw in a little bit of DLC here and there, but other than that, it should be a fun time. So from me, Neil Wood, this has been simracingonline.co.uk. We'll see you next time.